can join later. So please let me know if the PPT is possible. Can you see the PPT? Is the PPT visible? Am I audible? Yes, okay. Okay, fine. So let's start the class. Today we are going to discuss Edmund Wilson and his essay Marxism and Literature. Slideshow. So if there is any difficulty in seeing the PPT or if my voice breaks, please let me know. So first, let's look into Edmund Wilson. Edmund Wilson is one of the most significant 20th century critic. Edmund Wilson is one of the most, so we are from the last 2-3 essays, we are dealing with 20th century critics, and we have Edmund Wilson. He is one of the most significant 20th century critic. He was greatly influenced by the Freudian and Marxist approaches in criticism. In this essay, we will be discussing about Marxist approach, what Marxism is, and in the next coming essay, we will discuss more about Freudian concept. So, when we discussed about different approaches in different critical approaches, we have discussed about moralistic approach, sociological approach. I hope you remember all these things. I don't know if you were in the last class. Moralistic approach, psychological approach, sociological approach, archetypal approach, and formalistic approach. We discussed these 5 approaches. And Marxism. Okay, sharing this PPT, actually I have taken this from the textbook. All these points are from the textbook, so you can refer to the textbook. So Marxism, when we talk about Marxism, it comes under sociological approach. So you know what a sociological approach is. The sociological approach or the sociological critic, what they do is they try to understand the social milieu and they judge the writer on the basis of his response to the society. So it's generally a criticism on the society, what a society is at a particular period of time, how does the society behave, and how the writer is responding to the societal factors. So in that sense, Marxism also is a sociological approach. We'll discuss how it becomes a sociological approach. And even though he was influenced by Freudian and Marxist approach, he cannot be regarded as a Freudian or a Marxist critic, nor he is an exponent in any ideological ism. You know, ism, ideological ism is the ideology. He does not believe in any movement. He's not an exponent. We won't name Edmund Wilson as an exponent in any of the movements. His approach is best described as a kind of empirical descriptive literary history. So he deals with the empirical, general idea, the universal idea about literary history. Edmund Wilson began his career in journalism as a reporter for the New York Evening Sun. So his career began as a journalist. He was a journalist. He was a reporter for the newspaper New York Evening Sun. And he also worked in other magazines like Vanity Fair, New Republic, New Yorker, etc. You can refer this to the textbook. His Access Castle is a 1931 book, and it is regarded as the best introduction to the symbolistic movement. This book, someone's audio is on, I guess. Okay. This one is important. His Axel's Castle is regarded as the best introduction to the symbolistic movement. Sorry. Moving on to the essay. The present essay, Marxism and Literature, is taken from Edmund Wilson's The Triple Thinkers. So it is taken from his collection called Triple Thinkers. It was published in 1938. It was first published by the Atlantic Monthly in 1937. It was first published in the Atlantic Monthly. It's a magazine, and it was published in 1937. In this thought-provoking essay, Edmund Wilson evaluates the impact of Marxism on art and literature. So he evaluates the impact of Marxism. He is discussing about Marxism on art and literature. Tracing the evolution of Marxist attitude towards art, he explodes the myth that art can be a weapon of social, political, and economic propaganda. It is a scathing attack on the dogmatic Russian communist view of literature, which tries to dictate literature according to their needs and taste. So, Marxism is an ideology put forward by Karl Marx. It is basically a communist ideology. It actually took birth in Russia. Russian communist ideology. So what Edmund Wilson does is he is trying to analyze the impact of Marxism on art and literature. And there was this myth that art can be, according to Marxist critics, they consider art as a weapon of social, political, and economic propaganda. And this essay attacks the Russian communist view of literature, because according to Russian communist view, they are dictating literature according to their needs and taste. According to their needs, they are manipulating literature. So he is attacking that way of manipulating literature. It reflects the disillusionment of Wilson with Marxism, particularly as practiced and preached under Stalin's dictatorship. So you know, Stalin was a dictator. He ruled Russia, and under Stalin's dictatorship, the idea of literature was, we'll discuss how under Stalin's dictatorship the literature was. So Edmund Wilson was very disillusioned. He was not happy with how Stalin dealt with Marxist ideologies, how he practiced and preached his Marxist ideology. So he actually manipulated the entire ideology to favor his ideas. Art is not produced in a vacuum. Art is not just produced from nothing. It is produced in a fixed time and place. So we know any a work of art, it is produced in a particular time and place. Hence, both art and society are interlinked. So we cannot separate art and society. Art and society are always connected. So according to Marxism, they say that art represents the social milieu. Art represents what is happening in the society, their response to the problems happening in the society. And Wilson examines the role assigned to literature and art in the system of dialectical materialism of Marx. Dialectical materialism is one of the book by Karl Marx, and he describes about Marxism in dialectical materialism. So Wilson examines the role assigned to literature and art. So in dialectical materialism, Marx assigned a particular role to literature and art, and Wilson is examining them, analyzing them, and trying to describe it. According to Marx and Engels are the proponents of Marxism. They are the, remember the name, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels are the proponents of Marxism. They are the proponents of Marxist thought. Their forms of human society grew out of the methods of production prevalent at the time and place. So according to Marx and Engels, how human society grew, how human society took its birth. Human society grew out of the methods of production. There are different kinds of production in the society. It depends on the time and place. At what time we are describing, at what place we are describing. So according to the time and place, there are certain prevalent methods of production. And these methods of production led way to the human society. The higher So when we talk about Marxism, there are base structure and superstructure. Base structure and superstructure. The higher activities such as politics, law, religion, or philosophy, literature, and art arise as superstructure from the social forms of the base structure. So, base structure is the base. Base structure is the base. That is the economic and material production and economic relation. The material production and economic relation is the base, and the political, legal, and cultural dimensions of the society are the superstructure. See, politics, law, religion, philosophy, literature, and art. These are the superstructure. They emerge from the base. Base is the economic relationship, is the material production. That is the base. So all these superstructure arises from the base. Okay. So that is base and superstructure. All the economic relation and material production are the base, and from base the superstructure emerges. The political, the religious, the philosophical, literature, law-based, and art, all these are the superstructure, and they are formed from the base. That is the basic idea of base and superstructure according to Marxism. Wilson points out that these activities are not always explicable in terms of economics. This is not always related to the economical terms. Wilson suggests that art must cease to flourish with social system, which made it possible by providing the artist with training and leisure, even though the artist himself may have been working for the destruction of that system. See, according to Edmund Wilson, how he describes art, or how he says art should be. So according to him, art must cease to flourish with social system. They should stop flourishing with social system, which made it possible. How can we make it possible? By providing the artist with training and leisure. By providing the artist with training and leisure. And even though if the artist is trying to work, or he is trying to destroy the system, even though he is working for the destruction of that system, the art must cease with social system. That is what, according to art, according to Edmund Wilson, art is. And Marx and Engels seems to consider art as an independent activity. So Edmund Wilson is describing about art according to Marx and Engels. He is describing art based on their Marxist ideology. So according to Marx and Engels, they consider art as an independent activity. They say that it is an independent activity. They do not want to judge the validity of work of art on the basis of the socio-economic formulas. Even though they talked about the economic condition or social conditions, they ignore the fact that, or they do not want to judge the art based on the socio-economic condition. They do not want to judge the validity of the work of art on the basis of socio-economic formula. So they responded to the imaginative work on its artistic merit. So they gave importance to the imaginative work. Did you understand? It's a bit difficult. You should know what Marxism is, then only you will be able to understand. Marxism is an ideology propagated by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And according to Marxism, so just imagine literature based on the Marxist ideology in literature is that they are examining the social condition. They consider art as a weapon. They consider that through art, we can make social changes. We can represent the problems or the disillusionment or the disinterest towards the ruling society. So the ruling party in the society. So that is what Marxism says. We can represent, we can use art as a weapon to fight against the social, political, and economic conditions. So next is Lenin. Lenin considered art as a weapon of social change. It is Lenin who considered weapon. See, first here it says that Marx and Engels, they consider art as an independent activity. They do not want to judge the work of art based on socio-economic conditions. They are not considering art based on the socio-economic conditions. So, but what Lenin does is he is considering the art as a weapon of social change. He believed that because Marx and Engels, they never wanted to specialize art as a weapon. They never considered art as a weapon. They considered art as an imaginative work. They considered art as an independent activity which is free from the socio-economic problems. But according to Lenin, he considered art as a weapon of social change. So remember, Marx and Engels, they never considered art as a weapon. They considered art as an independent activity. They freed the art from socio-economic conditions. Whereas Lenin considered art as a weapon of social change, and he says that all work, each and every work should work for social changes. They should work their best for social changes. Then we have Trotsky. Trotsky talked about carry-over value of literature. Carry-over value of literature. So you know what bourgeois society is? Bourgeois is the upper class. The upper middle class is the bourgeois society. So according to Marxist ideology, Marxists had to face problem whether the literature created during the old bourgeois society could be of any use in the new society of the revolution. So in the new society, there is revolution. People are fighting against the existing social norms. They want change. So it is the art is used as a weapon of change. But the Marxists had to face a problem because there was this literature of old bourgeois society and literature of the new society. So they don't know whether they can take the literature of the old bourgeois society to the contemporary period, to the present period. They don't know whether it is applicable. Can we take the old literature to the new? Is a question. So Trotsky was concerned with this problem as well. Then he talked about carry-over value of literature. So according to Trotsky, carryover literature means the value attached to literature created during the old bourgeois society to the new society of revolution. They in general feel that there is no way, it's no use of, so no use to the new society. So carry over value, carry over. Carry means what? To take it, right? We are taking it from one place to another. What are we taking here? Literature. We are taking the literature from the old bourgeois society to the new society. New society is where revolution happens. People are revolting against the society. It is a revolutionary period. So carry over value. So we are carrying the value, asking the question whether it is possible to carry the value of literature from the old bourgeois society to the new society, new revolutionary society, that is carry over value of literature. And they say that it is of no use to the new society. If we take old bourgeois literature to the new society, it is of no use because the society changed. So when the society changes, is it possible to adopt the old thing? No, it is time for new literature. It is time for new values. Did you understand what carry over value of literature is?
Yes, madam.
Did you? Yes, okay. So this is an important point. Remember, it's like you can study as you can connect it and study. At first, the Marxism was proposed by Marx and Engels. We have Marx and Engels first. Then Marx, according to Marx and Engels, they considered art as an independent activity, and they say that they never judged a work of art based on the socio-economic condition. Then comes Lenin. According to Lenin, art is a weapon of social change, and he is calling out the art writers to work towards, or artists to work towards the social change. Then we have Trotsky. Trotsky is more concerned with carryover value of literature. So he says that according to the idea of Trotsky, they are asking the question whether the value of old bourgeois society literature can be taken to new society of revolution. And they came to the conclusion that the old literature is of no use to the new society. Okay. Then there is this term prolet cult. Prolet cult is another term. There emerged in Russia a group called prolet cult. So prolet cult was a group emerged in Russia, and they aimed at monopolizing the control of Soviet literature. So they wanted the monopoly over literature. Okay. So monopoly means they want to have the control. The total control. The group want to have the total control of literature. They do not want anyone else to take part in the literature. That is monopolizing of the literature. So this Russian group is called Prolet Cult, and they aimed at monopolizing the control of Soviet literature. Soviet is Russian literature. They wanted to control the Russian literature. And Lenin and Trotsky, they both were against Prolet Cult. Okay. So Lenin opposed it, insisting that proletarian culture or art could not be produced by official dictation of policy, but only by natural evolution as development of those reserves of knowledge which society worked for under the oppression of capitalism, of the landlords and of the officials. So that means, according to Lenin, he was against prolet cult because he said that a proletarian culture or a proletarian art, it cannot be produced by any policy. If you have given out certain policies and ask people to work under that policy, it is not possible. It is not possible. Literature is not produced through any official policies. It is a natural evolution, right? Literature is a natural evolution. It should evolve naturally. Literature is developed based on the society. If the society is under oppression of capitalism or under the oppression of landlords and under the oppression of officials, then there emerges a literature, and that literature would be a revolt against the existing ruling class. Okay, that is what Lenin says. According to Lenin, it is not possible for an art or a culture to emerge from certain policies. So see, dictatorship, when dictatorship is there, it is the ruler who determines. People have no freedom of choosing. People have no freedom at all about what is happening in the society. See, there is no freedom. Then will it, or others cannot write anything. So Lenin is saying that if you have certain official policy, it is not possible to produce art. The art is produced naturally based on the society. Whatever is happening in the society, based on that, the art is being produced. It's a natural evolution under the society. And then we have Trotsky. Trotsky is also against prolet cult. According to Trotsky, he dismisses the term proletarian literature or proletarian culture. He dismisses it altogether and says that it is dangerous because we cannot compress the culture of the future, right, in the narrow limits of the present day. So if you are limiting the present day situation, if you are limiting everything to a single group, if you are limiting the literature to a single group, it is not possible for the future to work on it. It is they are compressing the culture of the future as well. That is what Trotsky is saying. Okay. So once again, I'll repeat, prolet cult. Prolet cult is a Russian group whose aim was to monopolize the Soviet literature. They wanted to take over the control of Soviet literature, and Lenin and Trotsky were against the prolet cult. Prolet cult, proletarian culture. Okay, prolet cult is a short form for proletarian culture. Proletarians are who are fighting against the bourgeois society. Proletarians are who fight against the bourgeois society. So Lenin says that if there are certain official policy and if you are asked to work under an official policy, it is very difficult to have a proletarian culture or proletarian art. It cannot be produced by any policy. It should emerge naturally. So if we say proletarians are suppressed under the capitalism, or they are suppressed under the landlords or officials, then emerges a literature. According to Trotsky, he is saying that if we have a proletarian literature or a proletarian culture, it is very dangerous, because they are compressing the future generation. They are compressing the culture of the future, and they are by limiting the present day, by limits of the present day. Did you understand what prolet cult and why Lenin and Trotsky are against it?
Yes.
Did you understand? Do you want me to repeat it, or can we move forward? I hope you understood it. Next is Stalin. After Lenin, we have Stalin. Stalin's rule, Stalin was a dictator. Okay. By Stalin's rule, it marked the end of liberalism. See, there is so these all emerged in Russia. Okay, in Russia, the government has a control over literature. Okay, and they wanted art to subscribe to the government's view. The government has certain views. We know that in different countries, the government has different views. The ideology of the ruling party is different. And in Russia, what happened is the government has a control over literature. They say that the literature should follow the government's view. If they are writing against the government, then there is a problem. If they won't allow it to be published, or they won't allow it to happen, they want the writers to always agree to the government's view. So then there were different cultural groups. They took part in the Russian Revolution, attempt to dominate literature with or without the authority of the government. So there are certain groups emerged, and these groups fought against, because they wanted to take control over the literature from the government. They wanted to take away the control of government, and they wanted to have control by themselves. Okay. And when Lenin died and Trotsky was exiled, and then art and literature. So Lenin, Trotsky, these people were fighting against the government. Okay, they were fighting against the government, because government always wanted the literature to be under their idea. So these people fought against it. Then Lenin died and Trotsky was exiled from Russia. Then the art and literature degenerated into a mere propaganda and weapons of the state. Then the literature became mere weapon of the state. There is no one to fight against it. If there is no one to fight against it, the state can do whatever they like, right? So the art and literature, it just became a propaganda for the political ideology. They just wanted to talk about the political ideology, and they used art and literature to talk about politics, and it just became a weapon of the state. Then comes Stalin was the ruler at that time. Stalin tried to use literature as a mere means of manipulating the illiterate masses of Russia. So there are these illiterate people with no much education. So these illiterate masses of Russia, and what Stalin does is he tried to manipulate them. Through literature and through art, Stalin tried to manipulate the common people of Russia. So you can see these things happening in different countries. In the present situation also, there are certain countries where the literature, the government is manipulating the common people through by injecting different ideologies. So they said that, and during Stalin's rule, Stalin was a dictator. So during Stalin's rule, there was no opposition, no political opposition. And when there is no political opposition, there is no one to criticize the government. Right? So the opposition is needed in a country in order to oppose the government's rule. So government can take anything they want. So it is, opposition is necessary to say that, okay, this is not good, this is not good for the country, so you shouldn't do this. So there is opposition needed to say these things. But when there is no opposition, there is no criticism. So there is no one to fight against what the government is doing. So here what the government is doing is they are manipulating people by using art and literature. Okay. Then there are certain limitations of Marxist criticism. Marxist criticism had certain limitations. So we'll discuss what the limitations are. First one is failure to understand irony. You know what irony is, right? We were discussing about irony in the last class. What is irony? When you say something, it means the opposite of it. That is irony. When you say something, irony means the opposite of it. So people were, it's
Verbal
very,
irony, no, ma'am?
Yes, what?
I said verbal irony.
No, I didn't hear you. Can you speak a bit loud?
Verbal irony.
Yeah, verbal irony. We talked about irony in the last class.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. When there is a sentence, irony means when you say something, you mean the opposite of it. So when you say that in a dictatorship government, when you say it in a government when there's no freedom, when you talk about irony, will it be possible to understand? No, it is not possible to understand. So the art contains a lot of irony, but the Marxist failed to understand the irony in the literature. Then we have attempt to legislate art and literature. There were certain, so legislate means there were certain prescribed rules and formulas for writing ideal Marxist books. So all the critics should know the rules of a work of art. And so according to the Marxist people, the primary function of the rule, why do they need rule in the government, rule in the work? So they need rule because they want to lead the proletarian reader, that is a common reader, to recognize their role in the class struggle. There's a class struggle happening, right? They want to make the proletarian readers know their role in the class struggle, and they want to show a direct or indirect effect in the class struggle. And they wanted the authors to make feel the reader. They wanted the readers to make feel that they are participating in the described lives. They're participating in the fight. And then the author's point of view must be a proletarian point of view. Then we used art as a weapon of, see, that is that's a wrong perception of Marxist view, right? The Marxists look at the work of art merely for social moral. They wanted the literary work, they wanted the art and literature only as a social moral. They wanted to give some morality in the government, the morality in the society. They fail to understand that a work of art is not merely a message, but a complex vision of things. See, a work of art is a complex thing. It contains a lot of ideas, right? It has a lot of things. It is not just a message. It just not only propose moral ideas. It also has some aesthetic beauty in it. But the Marxists failed to understand the aesthetic beauty of the literature, and they only wanted to use it as a medium of message. So that is a wrong thing to assume. Then art as a weapon of class struggle. So here they considered art as a weapon of class struggle. They wanted the art to be a form of class struggle where they represent the society, they represent the struggle in the society. They wanted to acquire some freedom in the discrimination. Then they considered art, they used art as a weapon for the struggle. Then there's a confusion of values between long range and short range literature. Long range literature and short range literature, the Marxists were unable to, they didn't had the ability, they were unable to distinguish between long range and short range literature. See, long range literature means they attempt to sum up a wide area, a large area. They try to sum up a large, wide area, long period of human experience. Okay, whereas short range literature, they were preachers and pamphleteers with a view of immediate effects. So long range means it includes a wide area and a long period of human experience. It takes years to fight. Whereas short range literature is preachings and pamphlets which has an immediate effect on society. So Marxist critics for they couldn't distinguish between long range and short range literature. Then there's period most favorable to literature. According to Edmund Wilson, the period most favorable for work of art are the time of peace, leisure and social stability rather than those of revolutions and struggle. So we had a society with revolutions and struggle, and according to Edmund Wilson, the period of revolution and the period of struggle is not the most favorable for art. It is not most favorable period. It is the period, it is the time of peace, time of leisure and time of social stability, and that is the most favorable period, most acceptable period for the work of art. Okay, and then we have democratization of culture, democratization of literature and culture. Democratization means giving democracy to literature and culture. Usually, earlier period when there was this before revolution, the art and literature, culture and literature are controlled by the government, right? Controlled by the ruling class. And then after the struggle, there was a democratization. It was given a democracy. So literature should use the language of common man. It can assert its dignity. So there were different literary works that represent common man and their dignity. They wanted to escape from the bourgeois society. So according to Edmund Wilson, he says that it is not the Marxist monopoly. Democratization of culture and literature is not Marxist monopoly. Even before Marxism, there was this democratization of literature and culture. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Democratization of literature and culture is a worldwide phenomenon. It happened everywhere in the world. It can be found in the American literature. He is giving example of American literature where they produced a literature of common man's escape from bourgeois society. Common people escaped from the bourgeois society by representing their ideas, by representing the common man's dignity, by representing through common man's language. And in America, they had a period of boom and depression. In America, they had a period of boom and depression. It affected the literature also. It can be considered as the proletarian literature. During the time of depression and during the time of economic boom, the literature was a common man's literature, and that can be termed as proletarian literature, the literature of common man. That is proletarian literature. So that is all about Marxism and literature. Here we discussed how Edmund Wilson evaluates the Marxism of art and evaluate art and literature based on the idea of Marxism. He explores the myth that art can be used as a weapon of propaganda. See how art is used as a weapon of propaganda by the existing government. The government, what they did is they considered art as a medium of propaganda, medium of reaching to common people and manipulating them. And then when Marxism came, they they used art as a medium of propaganda, and then they fought against it. There was class struggle, and after the class struggle, what happened? Literature became free from the bourgeois, and so literature became the proletarian literature, where common people can represent their issues, common people can represent their society. Did you understand? Do you want me to repeat any point, or is it clear? Any doubts? No doubts. Okay, then we will go forward with Lionel Trilling. Understood. Okay. So next we are going to discuss about Lionel Trilling and his essay Freud and Literature. Freud and Literature. Freud as Sigmund Freud is a famous psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis comes under what approach? Psychological approach. The critical approach, psychological approach. So Lionel Trilling is one of the reputed critics of the 20th century who combined the new critical approach with the insights in the cultural context of the text. Lionel Trilling, what he did is, you know what new critical approach is? New critical approach is what is new criticism? New criticism is an intrinsic approach towards literature, right? Considering the literature as an intrinsic factor, close reading of the text, reading the text, analyzing the text from a internal elements, through internal elements like form, technique, etc. And they completely exclude the external or extrinsic factors such as biography of the writer, social condition, context, psychology of the writer, etc. Right? That is new criticism. But here, what Lionel Trilling is trying to do is, he is trying to combine new critical approach with cultural context. See, cultural context, according to new criticism, cultural context is against, right? They disregarded the cultural context. But here, Lionel Trilling is trying to combine these two things. Though influenced by the new critics, he does not believe in the autonomy of art. Sorry. He does not believe in the autonomy of art, and always emphasize the ways in which work of literature both affect and reflect cultural context in their time. So, like according to Trilling, he is influenced by new criticism. His ideas were his ideas came up from the new critics. His ideas emerged from the ideas of new critics, but he does not believe in the autonomy of art. He says that nobody has the autonomy of art, and he says that literature always affect the culture. Literature always reflect the culture. In whatever time the literary work is being written, the literature represents the time period, right? They represent the culture of that particular time. If you read any literary work, you can see the culture of that particular time. If you take a novel from the Victorian period, the novel contains the Victorian culture, right? What Victorian society is, their culture, how the people lived in that society. So the literature can actually reflect the culture. It can also affect the culture also. It affects people also. It works both ways, affect and reflect. And the essay which we are going to discuss, in the text you can read the biography of Lionel Trilling. The present essay, that is Freud and Literature, was first published in the Kenyan Review, spring 1940 edition, and it revised the form in Horizon, another magazine, Horizon, September 1947. It was later reprinted in the Liberal Imagination. The Liberal Imagination was a book published in 1950, and it later appeared in the Liberal Imagination. It is regarded as the best introduction to Freud. So Freud and Literature is considered to be the best introduction of Freud and the contribution of his thought to literature and criticism. Freud contributed to the literature, right? Freud is an important figure in psychoanalysis. His thoughts, his ideas, were evident in the literary work. So his what Lionel Trilling does is, through this essay, he is analyzing Freud's concepts, Freud's thought of literature, Freud's thoughts of literary criticism, his contribution towards all these. That is what Trilling does. Trilling deals with the complex subject matter lucidly and even though, see, psychoanalysis is a very heavy topic. It's a complex topic. It is very difficult to understand psychoanalysis just in one class. So it's a huge topic. But here, in what Trilling does is he makes this complex subject matter very simple and clear. He's trying to make it very simple and clear. See, this essay is divided into 4 parts. The whole essay, we can divide the essay into 4 parts. In part 1, Trilling analyzes the influences that Freud's theories of psychology and the influence he wielded on the subsequent writers. So in the first part, what you can see is Trilling is analyzing Freud's theory of psychology. He analyzes Freud's theory of psychology, and then he talks about how it influenced the subsequent writers who talked about this. And then the part 2, he deals with Freud's rationalism. In part 3, he examines the utility and relevance of the psychoanalytic technique for the study of art, especially literature. See, psychoanalysis is basically a treatment therapy. And from there, he understanding or analyzing how this is relevant in art. How can we study an art based on psychoanalysis, especially literature? How can you study or how can you examine a literature based on the psychoanalytic technique? That is what Trilling says in the third part of the essay. In part 4, he assesses the contribution of Freud to literature. Okay, this is the 4 parts. Literary influences on Freud. See, Freudian psychology is the only systematic account of the human mind. This is the only idea that represents human mind. It is Freudian psychology is based on human nature. It is based on human nature. Hence, it influenced literature also. Okay. Freud was not the original discoverer of unconscious. See, Freud talks about the unconscious mind, human unconscious mind. But he himself says that he is not the original person to discover unconscious. He says that there were several poets and philosophers before him who discovered the unconscious. And what Freud does is he made a scientific method of analyzing this unconscious. He made a scientific method by which the unconscious can be studied. Okay. There were other writers like Romantics or Rousseau. Rousseau's confession influenced Freud. Rousseau accounted his childhood. In Confessions, Rousseau described about his childhood, how he was exposed to immorality, even which lies hidden in the self. Even in a good man, there is an immorality. So all these things, his life incidents were described in the Confessions. Oh, I am teaching literary criticism. I am teaching literary criticism. You have a 5th course that is literary criticism. I'm teaching literary criticism. So Rousseau's confession actually influenced Freud. Then they have Romantics. Romantics also talked about human emotions, complexity of human mind, that Wordsworth, Coleridge, Matthew Arnold, and all these people influenced Freud. Even John Stuart Mill also influenced Freud. And there were other sexual revolution created by writers like Shelley, Schlegel, George Sand, Schopenhauer, Ibsen, etc. And these people also influenced Freud. So there were different people who influenced Freud. So they say that Freud is not the first person to talk about the unconscious. The surrealists like Kafka, the surrealist, then Kafka, Thomas Mann, and importantly James Joyce. These people were influenced by Freudian thought. These people draw inspiration from Freud. And Freud's rationalism and view of art. See, according to Freud, Trilling is saying that according to Freud, the aim of psychoanalysis is to control night side of life. What happens at night? At night you sleep, right? You all sleep. What happens in sleep? You all dream, right? At night you sleep, and in sleep there will be dreams. So Freud talked about dreams. He had a dream analysis. He talked about dreams. That is basically psychoanalysis is controlling the night side of life. They're talking about the dream. See, we have the human mind is very complex. Freud divided human mind into id, ego, and superego. And he says that there's a conflict between id and ego. Id and ego both had a conflict. Your ego wanted to, there's a conflict, and he wanted to, Freud wanted to strengthen the ego. The id was the irrational, non-logical, pleasure-seeking dark force. It's like a villain. The id part of our mind, it is irrational. It doesn't have any logic. It is the pleasure-seeking part of the brain. And ego is the intelligence and control. Ego is the controlling force of the mind. Ego is the controlling force of the mind. So remember what id and ego are. Id is the irrational, non-logical, pleasure-seeking dark force, and ego is the intelligent and control. If we have id, we also have ego. All human beings have both id and ego. And art as an illusion. How Freud considered art as an illusion. Freud talked a lot about art. He considered art as one of the true charm of good life. It is one of the true charm of good life. He admires writers and artists. He calls literary men the precursors of psychoanalysis. Because see, in literature or in art, these artists and writers, they understand life. They are trying to understand life. They are describing human life through art and literature. So Freud says that these artists and writers, they are like a precursors. They are the pre-runners of psychoanalysis because they're dealing with human life. But he then talks with very contempt. He says that art is a substitute gratification. It is an illusion in contrast to reality. Art is not real. According to Freud, he says that art is not real. It's an illusion. It's a substitute gratification. Unlike most illusions, our art is harmless and beneficial. According to Freud, he says that it is an illusion. See, like other illusions, what happened? Illusions is you are imagining things. When you imagine things, mostly harmless. It does not harm anyone and it has a benefit. Because it does not seek to be anything but an illusion. Illusion just remains as an illusion. It does not want to be anything more. It's just an illusion. Same way, art is just an illusion. It doesn't want to be anything else. And he says that one of the chief function of art is to serve as a neurotic. It shares characteristics of dream, whose elements of distortion Freud called the sort of inner dissonance. See, how do we dream? According to Freud, we'll come to that. According to Freud, he says that we dream because we have certain desires in our mind. Humans have certain desires in their mind, and this will be suppressed. These desires are suppressed in our mind. So when we sleep, when we dream, these suppressed desires take control. It comes as dreams. Our suppressed inner desires take its form through dreams. And art as a neurotic. Freud places the art the same place as neurotic. There's a separation of imagination and intellectual capacity, right? Neurotic is neural problem, psychological problem. It is not the realm of this world. The artists are daydreamers. He says that the artists are daydreamers. They are misfits in the world. They do not fit in this world. Their views are unjustified. That is what he says. There's a psychoanalytic therapy. Psychoanalytic therapy proposed by Freud. So Trilling explains this point with a common illustration from analytical therapy, which deals with illusion. So there was this patient who comes to the physician. A patient comes to the physician and he wanted to be cured of fear of walking in the street. He has a fear in walking through the street. So the fear is real enough with physical symptoms. He has physical symptoms. So when we have a fear, it is usually psychological. That if we fear something, it is usually psychological. But this patient comes and he has a fear of walking in the street. When he go out, there were like certain physical symptoms like sweating palms. The heart starts beating so fast. His breath will be shortened breath. So this patient knows that there is no real cause for fear. There's no real cause for his fear because we know there is no machine gun. There are no tigers in the street. There are no machine guns on the street. So there is no point of fearing to go out in the street. So he knows that there is no real reason. But the physician knows that there is something real inside or within the patient. There is something within the patient. Right. The process of therapy is to make the patient discover this and free him from this effect. That is psychoanalytic therapy. So psychoanalytic therapy is usually talking, like when you go to a therapy, what they do is they talk with you. They take measures. They make the patient understand what their problem is and then deal with it. Right. So the aim of psychoanalytic therapy is to enable the patient to cope up with the real world the right way. According to Freud, there are two ways in dealing with external reality. One is practical, effective and positive way. That is, ego or the conscious or the rational self tries to control the id. The ego is the rational part. Id is the irrational part. When the irrational part comes to forefront, then we have issues. If we have id is controlling our mind, then there is an issue. It is the irrational part, right? If it is taking control, there's nothing. We can't do anything. We do things wrongly. That is why we have psychoanalysis issues comes. The patients with psychological issues are because it takes control of their mind. So one thing is talking with them, making them understand what their problem is, and then make the ego take control, the intellectual or the rational part to take control. The second way is opposite way, a fictional way. Instead of facing the harsh reality, the patient gives way to daydreaming or imagining things, kind of a schizophrenia. It is like imagining things, and they conceal the reality and they think about things. So reality and illusion are two polar extremes. Reality is what is there, whatever there it is, that is reality. Illusion is a response to what is not there. Illusion is what is not there. So second is a neurotic issue. That is why there comes the need for psychoanalytic therapy. Okay. Then there is dream versus art. You know how we dream, right? I just told how we dream. We dream because the suppressed desires comes out. Art is this substitute gratification, because art is what they represent. The inside suppressed dreams are manifested through art. Then, according to Freud, the right way to deal with external realities, I just talked about it, the practical effective way of id or ego. Then, according to Trilling, the analytical method is useful in two ways. There is an next part is an analytical method, psychoanalytical method. So, see, So there's a clinical procedure. He does not want to use the, see, there are quite limit. Oh, sorry, I just, okay. According to Trilling, he says that analytical method is very useful. Analytical method means psychoanalytical method. This therapy method is very useful to human beings. And this is useful to art in two ways. This is actually a clinical procedure. Experiment is done. Freud is basically a doctor. So it's basically a clinical procedure. So now they are analyzing how is it possible in art. See, analytical method is useful in art in two ways. First one is the inner meaning of the work of art is explained. See, analytical method explains the inner meaning. So when you read a novel, if you take, for example, if you read a novel, the novel has an inner meaning in it. It is a duty of the reader to find out the inner meanings. And then the temperament of the artist as when we can understand the writer, who the writer is, how he is. We can understand that as well. Okay. So we can understand the inner meaning of the work of art and as well as the temperament of the artist. That is the use of analytical method in art. So you can read the textbook. This is a summary of what it is discussed in that part. So this method of understanding human mind, Freud's contribution to understanding human mind has a far-reaching significance. It is very important in literature because not only literature and art, the understanding of human mind is important because basically literature itself is the study of human life and art itself is the study of human nature. So by understanding their by using psychoanalysis method, it is very easy to understand. It's very important. So there is certain terms like repetition and compulsion. Repetition and compulsion. Trilling points out two elements in Freud's thought. Okay, they are repetition and compulsion. Repetition, compulsion is one thought. The death instinct is another thought. These two thoughts are put forward by Freud, and Trilling is talking about these two. There are two ideas. One is repetition, compulsion, and the other is the death instinct. And these two ideas are put forward in the book Beyond the Pleasure Principle. Beyond the Pleasure Principle. So these two ideas Freud talks in his book Beyond the Pleasure Principle. This is the name of the book, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. See, this is the name of the book, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. And in the book Beyond the Pleasure Principle, he is talking about two ideas, repetition, compulsion, and the death instinct. So, what is repetition, compulsion? So, according to Freud, he expressed the view that all dreams, whatever dreams we have, all dreams, even the unpleasant ones, sometimes we see dreams that are very unpleasant, the scary dreams, right? We have scary dreams. The dream is very scary. So even the unpleasant dreams, these have the intention of fulfilling the dreamer's wish. The dreams have the duty of fulfilling the dreamer's wish. All the dreams takes place from our suppressed desire, and all these dreams have the intention of fulfilling a dreamer's wish. They serve what Freud calls the pleasure principle. See, the pleasure principle. I talked about the pleasure principle. We have a pleasure seeking part, and the pleasure principle is opposed to the reality principle, right? It is opposed to Reality principle. What is reality principle? Reality principle is based on the reality in the society, whereas the pleasure principle is opposed to the idea of reality principle. Okay. Are you understanding? So there were certain dreams. There are certain dreams, and these dreams fulfill our wishes. Okay. There are certain patterns in psychic behavior. Okay, and all these cannot be interpreted in the light of Freud's pleasure principle. So he revised his views and assumed that there is a repetition compulsion method. The repetition compulsion goes beyond the pleasure principle. The intent behind this is the developing fear. The developing fear. So the fear that is developed is the compulsion repetition. See, these dreamers who have this fear, he says that they're attempting to restore control. They have a traumatic neurosis and they're trying to restore control. So the dream is trying to reconstruct the bad situation. See, there are certain bad dreams, and the dreams, what they do is, the dream is trying to reconstruct the bad situation. When you see a bad dream, doesn't mean a bad dream itself. It is the mind's way of reconstructing the bad dream. They're trying to make you feel better. Okay. And by the end, there is a purification process, and that fear is taken away. That is the repetition compulsion method. And next is a death instinct. Death instinct is the second idea. It is also put forward in the book Beyond the Pleasure Principle. And this Beyond the Pleasure Principle it came out in 1920. Okay, came out in 1920. See, what is death instinct? You know what a death is. A death is the final goal of man, like final or desired goal of man. At the end of our life, what happens? We die. So it is the desired goal. We live for a goal. The goal of human being is to die at the end. We are waiting for our death. Death is the final point. So death is the final point in human life. Just understand that. So according to Freud, the death instinct is that human beings know that at the end, we all know, right? We'll die at the end. It is our desired goal. We are waiting for that goal. That is the death instinct. So I hope you understood. So in the book Beyond the Pleasure Principle, Freud is talking about repetition compulsion and the death instinct. Repetition compulsion is the way of developing fear. See, the fear, the unpleasant dreams are a way of restructuring or reconstructing the bad situation to overcome the fear. A death instinct is that the final or desired goal of man is death. And according to Trilling, there are quite few limitations of psychoanalytic method. Psychoanalytic method is not 100% possibility. There are certain limitations. For example, Freud does not encroach upon the artist autonomy. He is not talking about, he does not encroach upon artist autonomy. So there are certain substantially useless and awkward terms of clinical procedure, and he does not want to use all of that words in the work of art. He says that Psychoanalysis says less about beauty. See, when you approach a book from the psychoanalytic point of view, it talks very less about beauty. It talks more about the human mind. It talks less about the beauty or aesthetic beauty of the work. See, when we talked about Marxism also, it also does not talk much about the beauty of the work. Even new critics also does not give importance to the aesthetic beauty of the work. Similarly, psychoanalysis also does not talk about the beauty of the work. He confesses to his indifference to the form of art and restricts himself to the content. He does not consider, here Freud is not considering about the tone, feeling, style, or the modification that part makes upon part. The parts are joined together through the tone, feeling, style, and modification, but he is not talking about that. He elucidates neither the nature of artistic gift nor the artist. He is not giving importance to the artistic gift, nature of the artistic gift, nor the artist. He is not talking about them. Did you understand? Do you want me to repeat it? Here we talked about Lionel Trilling, and we talked about Freud, introduction to Freud, what he talks about human mind, how he talks about id and ego, how he talks about art as an illusion, how we did dream, how to understand external reality, his two ideas of repetition, compulsion, and death instinct, and the limitations of psychoanalysis. Did you understand? Any doubts? Any doubts? Is it clear, or do you have any doubts? No doubts. Okay. So by this, we have come an end to block 3, that critical approaches to literature part 1. And so far we have discussed about criticism, Aristotle, Samuel Johnson, Wordsworth and Coleridge, Matthew Arnold, T.S. Eliot, I.A. Richards, Clint Brooks. And then we talked about different critical approaches, moralistic approach. Then we talked about moralistic approach. Neoclassical writing is an example of moralistic approach. Then we talked about psychological approach, where psychoanalysis comes under psychological approach. Then we have sociological approach. Marxism comes under sociological approach. And then we have archetypal approach. And then we also have one more approach. What was it? Archetypal approach and formalistic approach. New criticism comes under formalistic approach. And then we talked about Edmund Wilson's, we talked about new criticism in the last class. And then new criticism is very, very important from the exam point of view. New criticism is very important. So study new criticism very well. Then we have Edmund Wilson's Marxism and Literature, and Lionel Trilling's Freud and Literature. These are the things we discussed. In the next class, we will discuss about feminism and then structuralism. And also we'll be discussing about Indian aesthetics, the Rasa theory and and stuff. And then we'll be having an interpretation of literature, where we will be discussing about poetry, drama, novel, and short story in a nutshell. So this is about the course also. Any doubts so far? No doubts, right? If you don't have any doubts, we can wind up the class. I mean, we completed the portion. We can meet in the next class. Any doubts? Any doubts so far? No. Okay, can we wind up the class then? Thank you.
No
Okay.
doubts, ma'am. Shall we leave?
Yeah, sure. Okay. We'll meet in the next class next week. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, you can leave the class now. Bye.